Hey, Stub Clubbers, welcome back to another 25 Days of Disney. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Brian.
And today's topic is to be talking about why 90s kids have the best Disney experience out of all generations. So let's do this.
Well, that's easy. I mean, that's when all the better cartoons were coming out. Bonkers, the Aladdin series, Little Mermaid, all that good stuff. And this is also the Disney Renaissance because the '80s they weren't very the '80s weren't very good to Disney. The '70s weren't very good to Disney, but this is when we got the actual Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is horrendously underrated. It's when we got everything. This is when Disney became Disney again. It wasn't princesses and stuff like that. It was more um, those kids that grew up with the Disney princesses making these new movies. So easy.
I was gonna say the exact same thing as Brian, so I got nothing. Sorry.
Really? I thought you said you had this whole grandiose
I
thing.
did, but it was all about the Renaissance era, and he just said
But you
it.
can be more specific. You could use
Well,
other
okay,
titles.
I guess I'll go off of it. So yeah, it all started with Little Mermaid in November 1989. Part of the successful films of the Renaissance era, and Disney all the way until with Tarzan in 1999. They said from those range of movies, that was the time of prime with Disney. So naturally, us 90s kids, as we were growing up, even though we were born either, maybe after some of those movies like Little Mermaid, or some of the movies came out while we were toddlers, we grew up watching those. And like Brian said, that those were the best movies, and they coined the term Renaissance era. And it really was the time when the Disney movies were at a height. Even like Lion King, and you got Toy Story. A lot of the classics came out during then. Now, when people were born later, and like years and years later, sure, they know these movies too, but maybe they didn't watch it as much as we did. It was right in that prime.
Mhm.
So when I was a kid, my main thing that I watched was Cartoon Network. So I didn't really grow up on the '90s when they were big in the '90s for Disney, but the way that I got it was Toon Disney, which was an early 2000s channel where it was all the '90s TV shows, some '80s TV shows, but they were more along the lines of like mid to late '90s, which was like Bonkers. The Mighty Ducks had a series. The Aladdin series, the Hercules series, they all ended up being more what I would watch at night for some reason because on Cartoon Network was when they had Adult Swim come on.
Okay, I
So
gotcha.
when I watched these and I learned what '90s Disney was far. It was different. I won't say it was superior because early 2000s Disney had a lot of good stuff too. It wasn't even just a renaissance for the movies; it was a renaissance for TV. Those cartoon shows, but they also had like I'm trying to remember what the TV shows were, like the actual like live action TV shows that they had on there for a while.
We were talking about ABC Kids with the Disney shows on there. Like Lilo and Stitch, they made not only I think that came out in 2002. So that was another hit. Not only was it a hit movie, though, they made a really successful like TV series out of it.
Mhm.
But even they did I don't know, Emperor's New Groove, which another movie from the early 2000s also had a TV show. I don't know, just a lot of the early 2000s movies were also like where it's at. And I know, Jennifer, you talked about, we had a discussion one time about how some of the newer Disney movies you don't think were that great.
Mhm.
Now, aside from the big hits of Frozen, and they did Tangled, those were really good. But there's probably, you could say, gaps of time with Disney where maybe the animated movies weren't that great, right?
Oh, I would definitely say that because the animation studio, I would say probably within recent years got saved by movies like Tangled and Frozen. because there were these big gaps of time, like they were putting out these weird movies after a certain time in the early 2000s where they really weren't that great.
Home
And
on the
so,
Range.
oh yeah, there was like a bunch of weird stuff where there was like Disney Channel movies. There were some
Yeah.
good hits like
Oh,
Cheetah Girls, but then they would put weird ones out like Cowbells and like all this other weird
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that would get put out there.
by the way, I was thinking of Boy Meets World. That's what I was thinking of. That was a huge 90s
Yes.
show. They had Sister Sister, which was another huge 90s show that was very popular on Disney. And the one that nobody ever remembers, but I really liked it, was Smart Guy, where they had where it was Tia and Tamara Mowry's little brother had his own TV show too.
Oh, yeah. Well, like That's So Raven. That was
Yeah.
another guy. And then I think you would say, well, Hannah Montana was a little bit later, but still in like the earliest 2000s prime versus now, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
But that was another one.
The stuff now with cartoons and TV shows they're usually trying to make a statement. I mean, I don't watch anything on Disney Channel anymore, or anything really related to cartoons anymore, except for the old stuff that Disney Plus has on the streaming service, or Paramount or HBO. I still watch some of the old stuff because nostalgia, but those still left a mark. They're very fun to watch still, even though the writing in the new TV shows are actually, if you watch them now, are a lot better than what you had in the old cartoons. But in the old cartoons, they weren't as refined. So they weren't really, at least this is my opinion, they weren't as refined. So you got to see a little bit of grit, and you got to see them actually like kind of make mistakes with what they're writing and what they're trying to do here. Like Bonkers is literally, it's an entire show based around the concept that Who Framed Roger Rabbit did. It's where humans and toons live together.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entire episode of Bonkers where Mickey Mouse is supposed to make an appearance, but somebody, I believe it's either somebody catches him or he just refuses to come out of his trailer, which it's literally a dog crate that you use to take the vets. But he won't come out. You hear his voice. It's somebody doing a really bad Mickey Mouse impression. But it's kind of, in the 90s, it was edgy. It was extreme and stuff like that. That's where we got Goof Troop from. It was what, Quack Pack, when the Huey, Dewey, and Louie grew up.
DuckTales.
It was DuckTales, but it was like a sequel to DuckTales. It was called Quack Pack, where they were all teenagers and they did these teenage things. Because in the 90s, the most cool thing to do, for at least Disney's sake, was be a teenager. And they were really trying to get that teenage audience, that like 14 to 18 range. They were really trying to get to. That's why they made like Hocus Pocus. Hocus Pocus is literally about a teenager who, for some reason, they're talking about this in a Disney movie, is a virgin, and is the reason why they're bringing back everybody they brought back
the virgin who lit the candle.
Like, because if you go back to like 1960s Disney, you'll never hear that. Never hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, they did the Black Cauldron, which was extremely like dark and gritty, but I mean, you'll never hear somebody talk about virginity.
That's true.
So
I'm gonna say, I thought of earlier shows too, like Lizzie McGuire and Phil of the Future were classics, and Brian saying we don't really watch that much on Disney Channel. However, when Jennifer and I went to Disney World, of course you watch the Disney Channel when you're in Disney World. It's just a lot of the shows now are really like corny. Jennifer, they got the cheese factor.
Yeah, definitely.
And I feel like maybe because it's Disney Channel and they want to make it very kid friendly, but I feel like it is not for a range of ages when you watch it. It's just very, very, very kiddish. And so
the way that I see it is, and I'm not trying to be political here, I think they've made it very much more PC and PG. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this is from the company that did blackface a lot back in the early 30s and stuff like that. They did a lot of blackface. So in the 90s, they were doing a lot of raunchy humor, even though it wasn't as bad as what you saw on like Ren and Stimpy or Ed and Eddie. They ended up doing more slapstick and stuff like that. It's stuff that can seriously get these kids hurt if they decide they want to try this stuff. So now you're seeing like Dog with a Blog and stuff like that. I know that's a show. I don't know how long it's running.
I've never seen it, but it just seems like a weird concept.
And then they did like the Girl Meets World, the reboot with Boy Meets World.
Mhm.
And I heard that
I'm actually glad you brought that up, Brian, because that's a very, very good example about Boy Meets World. I mean, that was in the 90s, right?
Yes.
Boy Meets World and Girl Meets World is a whole different thing. Like, what channel was Boy Meets World on? Was that on
Nick, I know it was on Disney for a while.
I don't know if it was on ABC or Disney Channel. It was one of them.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like they covered very serious topics sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was an episode where someone was talking about abuse, like parental abuse or relationship abuse, things like that. They went to really, really deep, sometimes dark topics.
Which one? Which one?
In Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World. Okay.
But when you watch Girl Meets World, oh boy, that's where I'm talking. It's very kiddish. They would never even say words like, I don't know, like virginity and things. Yeah. Like it's
Didn't
very.
They talk about like Topanga might be pregnant in one of the shows in an episode. I swear there's an episode where Topanga might be pregnant.
In Girl Meets World?
And no, in Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World? Maybe. Yeah, I mean, they talked about sex and everything on there. But when it comes to Girl Meets World, it's like they could only say the birds and the bees or something like that.
Yeah.
But I watched it, but I really didn't enjoy it as much. And granted, I have not watched all of Boy Meets World all the way through, but I've seen enough of it to be able to compare them. And that's a huge, drastic like difference just to how the writers were. And I mean, they probably had different writers and things, but it's just a really good example of like a spinoff they did and how I would say I'd prefer the 90s show.
There was an entire episode, and I remember this because it scared me as a kid, of Boy Meets World, where there was a killer running around the school and they were killing everybody off in the group.
Holy!
You would never see that now.
No.
Because they showed blood. They showed what was the teacher's name? I can't remember his name. Mr.
Winnie.
Mr. Yeah, Mr.
Winnie. Yeah.
The
best thing ever.
But they showed it, and they showed him how he got killed, and he had scissors in his back. Oh yeah, no, there's like, oh no, the here's the thing. The 90s cared, but only on like PBS or like Disney.
On Arthur.
PBS, and that was very like kid.
You are very right. Television has changed a ton because even on Home Improvement, you had an episode where Tim Allen needs to talk to Brad about sex. And that was on ABC. So that was owned by Disney. And you also had other things where Tim had to write his will. You're like, there's different stuff like that. In the 90s, they would talk about that. Like you said, Brian, it'd be edgier. And so that does make a difference between talking about our experience compared to different generations.
Times change.
Yeah.
It's surprising, and the reason being is because I think that's what made our generation more conscious about what is being put on TV. Even though for some of us it didn't really damage what we were seeing on TV.
No.
But for a lot of people, it was like, how could my parents let me watch this stuff? I mean, so this isn't Disney, and I know that, but on Cartoon Network, they had a show called Cow and Chicken. There was literally a devil with his ass out the entire time. You never see that in today, but it's hilarious to us. That show's hilarious. So I think it's funny as all can be. But now you wouldn't see that because it's more people are more conscious about what you see on TV now, and they're more conscious about what's being put out there for your kids to watch. The Disney Channel now is what I would compare to Disney Junior back then.
Yeah.
It's very much I guess another good way of putting it is like everything that you see on Disney now is your basic Full House TV show, but they might have different things thrown into it. Dog with the blog.
It's
really
like
has a
even
dog with
more
a blog.
G or a Y for young, like that type of stuff.
It's true.
I believe there's one where it's like there's a family of superheroes, not the Incredibles, but there's always a moral to the story of why they're doing this. There's like Good Luck Charlie, where they're trying to have there's episodes where it's always going to end with somebody learning a moral
lesson.
A lesson. It's going to end with the lesson. In the 90s, they didn't have those. Most of the time you did with these cartoons because you still want these kids to learn about what's going on. But then some of these shows you saw the end where like Hercules was standing over somebody and that was it.
Or we're going to continue doing our mischievous things we were doing in the episode.
Well, there's like, when you go back and look at different movies from, I don't know, years ago, early 2000s, we'll say there's, hidden Easter eggs. Like, I want to say it's in Hercules, but I don't remember. There's something about, there's a floor mat or a blanket, or it's in Aladdin where it's supposed to be Scar.
Dead, yes.
Well, no, he actually puts it on as a coat.
Well, what movie is that where we see?
That's Hercules.
Oh, it is Hercules. So yeah, like when you go back, there's some dark things you can see. Also, I think this is real, but on TikTok, somebody was pausing Beauty and the Beast over and over when Gaston's falling to his death, and in his eyes, you see these like dark skulls in his eyes. I don't know, but just some funny. Go back into some of the earlier Disney movies around
Disney was allowed to be a little bit more edgy when the 90s were around. That's the basic point that we're getting across, even though we're just talking about it. Disney was edgy. Disney had a lot of different things going on. And at some point they started losing it again. I believe like late 2000s when they started losing it. That's when they picked up Marvel and they picked up Spider-Man. So now they're basically coasting on the marketability of those characters. They're not really doing too much.
Yeah.
You don't really go and see like, oh, Disney Channel is doing really good. No, you see Disney Plus is doing really good.
Yeah, and they're not putting out as many, like, yes, maybe they'll put out more series and movies on Disney Plus, but we don't see many like Disney animated movies. When Brian mentioned the later 2000s, like before 2010, that the movies, like things were kind of going downhill. The movie that they said was something that kind of saved them was the Princess and the Frog in 2009, because that was coming back to the just like 2D, right, Jennifer, that the animation on these other movies. So that helped. And then now you're just seeing the Raya and the Dragon was that one that Disney put out recently, which was a good one, but they don't put in Moana, but you don't see like year after year a bunch of hits coming out, like when they threw out, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, just hit after hit after hit, Toy Story and all of them.
Their hits are what they're producing. It's not what they're making, it's what they're producing, which is what we get with Spider-Man, Marvel, Star Wars. That's what they're not going from what they used to do with their animation anymore, even though honestly I think the last great Disney movie was Moana. I think that's the last great Disney movie. If you're going pure Disney, that's because I didn't see Frozen 2, I didn't see Frozen 1. But I think Moana was the last great Disney movie. I haven't seen this Raya one yet. I'm sure it's fine. But their era of being in control of the animation studios, like they're being them being the top, I'd probably say is done. If I had to really guess, I'd probably say it's done.
What's really great about hearing like a statement like that saying like why do 90s kids have the best Disney experience is that people can take that at so many different angles. And what you guys just all heard is that we had many different thoughts of, well, why would it be the best experience for the 90s kids to have with Disney? And so I thought of something completely different in a way that what you guys went off of. So for me, I say that we entered the Disney era in such a great time when we were born. When we were born, we were in the midst of Disney putting out all of these hits that we have The Lion King, Toy Story, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, Tarzan, all of these things that people know as like the top of Disney. We got to witness that in prime. We got to have, like, when people say the explosion, the annoyance of Frozen, we got to deal with that firsthand, even with Pocahontas, like right when it came out. So we got all of like the good merchandise. We had all of this good, the toys, the bedding, the bedroom sets, the stuffed
That
animals.
is so true. I didn't
We
even
got
think
the
of that.
explosion, even like all of that. But when you think about it, we were also in the age where everything that came before us wasn't that old yet and was super popular. You have, when we were born, before us came Winnie the Pooh, Lady and the Tramp, the Aristocats, the Jungle Book, Oliver and Company, Peter Pan, 101 Dalmatians.
Mulan.
That's what?
Mulan.
No, I'm saying what came before us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so all that stuff came before us. So we got to experience all of that too when it wasn't that old, when that was maybe coming out too for VHS the first time. And we got to really experience that the kids now, that those movies are so beyond like how, so beyond them, like being in the 50s and 60s, that even though we were born in the 90s, it wasn't that far off from us. So they were still making merchandise. They were putting this on TV on like Sunday evenings when they would do Wonderful World of Disney. But then we got to experience, as we got older, like the live action stuff, like the live action Disney Channel shows. We got to then experience now as adults Marvel. And so look, we got to experience everything that came before us, the explosion. And now we, as adults, we get to experience the explosion of like Marvel and all of that. I think that's pretty special compared to everyone else.
We also get to
old adults. We're not young kids. We're at this age where it's like a sweet spot.
It's true. And like the other thing that we get to experience now are they're doing all the live action ones. Cruella, they did a live action Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, things like that. So we kind of got the best of both worlds. We were born, like you said, at that mark where it was either slightly after some that came out or right when they did came out in the 90s. So we got to experience the original animated film. And then now when they make the live action films, we can we're like, oh, we already experienced this. Now we get this new one. Whereas someone who was born years and years and years later might not, it's not the same.
I think the technology also I think it both helped and kind of ruined Disney.
Yes.
Because you don't see, how many animated features do you actually see from Disney? Disney started off as an animated feature company, Mickey Mouse, or at that point it was Steamboat Willie. And then when the Renaissance came in, that's when they had new technology, but they were still using their hands to draw. Lion King is probably one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. I think it's an overrated movie, being 100% honest, but it's a beautiful movie to look at. The drawings are beautiful. Hercules is an awesome way to make these Greek god characters into this new era of cartoon and animation. But then when you go to this now, everything is computers, and computers make things amazing. They put so much detail into everything now. Like, I mean, they had a whole picture of Mr. Incredible holding baby Jack Jack, and they just zoomed in on his shirt, and you can see the actual lines of the fabric. It's amazing what people can do with computers now, but they don't have the same feeling of
It
what
is
you saw
true.
back then.
Yeah, they got more and more away from what they were originally known for with doing the hand drawings. I know when we used to Lion King just sticks with me. I feel like when you put in the VHS and see the commercials, even some of the other early like 90s films, you'll see on the VHS for their commercials before the movie starts, they show like behind the scenes like how they made a movie, and they'll show the artists in the room like drawing and like the frames and how they have
through the paper
storyboard, the storyboard going across. And they got away from that, and now like you guys said, it's all they brought in CGI,
click
everything,
click.
yeah, and they're drawn on tablets, and it's so different to what it was years ago. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Which this is another, it's a revolution or a non-revolution, it's an evolution. This is what's going to happen.
It's bound.
This is what's going to happen to everything now. But computer animation isn't bad. It's sort of an uncanny valley when they start making it look realistic, and it's not as fun of seeing seeing an animated movie when it's super realistic. So they make it look more cartoony, but still animation. But when they're putting thousands upon thousands of fabrics into Mr. Incredible shirt when nobody cares, I mean, it's awesome seeing what they do, and I'm very proud of the people that can do that. Like, good job on your part, but I'm not here to see a shirt. I'm here to see The Incredibles.
That's a good way of putting it, though.
That's why I think that the 90s Disney movies were the last great Disney movies, because the Little Mermaid is a beautiful movie. It's fun. It's amazing to look at. Even with the dark point, it's still very much full of color. In some of these movies, the last beautifully looking Pixar movie to me was Up. And that's because they went on an adventure and you got to see all these beautiful landscapes. And don't get me wrong, these Pixar movies look great, but they're all starting to run together now. So I think the 90s was probably the best time for Disney, and that's just because that's when they really started getting back into gear with the animation. They started putting out more merchandise, like you said, and they got to have that feeling of, oh, this is brand new. We haven't seen this before.
Yeah, we all had those Disney bed sheets of some movie.
I didn't, but
okay, you're the odd man out then, I guess.
That's because I couldn't afford it, but so the 90s were great. The 90s were great. Not clothes wise, but the 90s were great.
So on that note, let us know in the comments below if there are things that you think why the 90s are the prime for Disney, or why it's the best generation to be in. So
and the Disney store is better.
Yes, the old Disney store is better too. Then. Well, now there's no Disney store.
Yep, they're all better.
Stupid. Anyways, thank you for joining us today for 25 Days of Disney. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. So make sure you have that notification bell on and you're subscribed to us. And we'll see you tomorrow for another 25 Days of Disney.
Bye-bye.
Bye.